Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your Chief Security Fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing Breaches of the Week, and this is actually a special Roe v. Wade edition of Breaches of the Week. We're going to go through our normal breaches, of which there are a ton, and then we're going to talk about privacy and data breaches that directly affect the Roe v. Wade decision, meaning women living in states that may have a slight issue with abortion. We are not talking about politics. I will get into that, but let's get started with our normal breaches. But before we do, I want to thank the following people that sent me a lot of this information. That would be Jason Dance, Chris Fellon, Darren Young, Sanders Slidenerink, and Barrett Peterson. Guys, thank you so very much. And with that, let's start with Carnival Cruise Lines for a 2020 data breach update. Apparently, there's been a multi-state settlement that has been reached. Now, if basically you are living in one of these states, you may be entitled to compensation at some point. Connecticut basically co-led a multi-state investigation with Florida and Washington, but they were assisted by, and these are the states that are in this lawsuit, Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Ohio, and North Carolina. They were also joined by Alaska, Colorado, Delaware, District of Columbia, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York. We got a lot of news here. North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. If you heard your state and you've been on a Carnival Cruise Line since around 2020 or before, you may be entitled to compensation. You're definitely going to want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about Robert Half. I believe they're actually a staffing agency. They confirmed that they had a data breach basically after an unauthorized party gained access to sensitive consumer data contained on their network. According to Robert Half, the breach resulted in the names and social security numbers of certain individuals being compromised. They filed this on June 14th of this year, and that's all I know so far. So if you have worked for, or have any relations with Robert Half, you may want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about Accordia Therapeutics. They also confirmed that they had a data breach and unauthorized party gained access to several, quote unquote, several employee email accounts. This breach resulted in names, dates of birth, medical record numbers, diagnosis information, treatment information, clinical information, prescription information, social security numbers, financial account information, insurance providers, and treatment cost information. So if you use Accordia Therapeutics for all your therapeutic needs, check in. Moving on, let's talk about the Baptist Health System, specifically two of their hospitals in San Antonio, Texas. They confirmed that they experienced a data breach. Basically, an unauthorized third party gained access to their computer network, installed a line of malicious code on the system's website, which is how they got in. Now, according to Baptist Medical Center, this resulted in full names, dates of birth, addresses, social security numbers, health insurance information, medical information, and billing information basically affected their patients and all of that. We are talking about more than 1.2 million patients in Texas alone. So heads up to you if you use the Baptist Health System, specifically two of their locations in the San Antonio, Texas area. Moving on, let's talk about Quality Temporary Services, aka Quality Staffing. They reported a data breach basically as they were a victim of a ransomware attack in 2021. So they're playing catch up here. Evidently, the breach impacted former employees and job applicants of Adams and Garth. This is a company that Qualified Staffing recently acquired. So this is basically an acquisition that was that essentially now they have to declare for their acquisition. Now, according to Qualified Staffing, the breach resulted in names, addresses, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, state IDs, passports, financial account information, payment card information, medical information, and health insurance information belonging to 81,355 individuals. So there you go. If you have anything to do with Quality Staffing, go ahead and check in. Further, let's talk about the following companies real quick: Honeywell, Motorola, Omron, Siemens, Emerson, JTech, Bentley, Nevada, Phoenix Contract, Procon OS, and Yokogawa. You've probably heard of some of those. A security report has recently been published on a set of 56 vulnerabilities that are collectively known as Icefall, and they affect the operational technology or OT equipment used basically in various in critical infrastructure and industrial control environments. Now, Icefall was discovered by security researchers at Force Scouts Labs, and it impacted devices, devices from these 10 vendors features that I just mentioned. Now, the type of security flaws included allow for things like remote code execution, compromising credentials, firmware and configuration changes, authentication bypasses, and logic manipulation. So if you have any industrial control systems or operational technology from Honeywell, Motorola, Omron, Siemens, Emerson, JTech, Bentley Nevada, Phoenix Contract, Pro ConOS, or Yokogawa, you gotta update those things, and you gotta update those things yesterday. 56 vulnerabilities are currently plaguing your critical infrastructure. Moving on, let's talk about the UK-based Yodel delivery service. Services for Yodel were disrupted due to a cyber attack that caused delays in parcel distribution and tracking orders online. The company has not published any details about the incident, such as when it occurred or its nature, but it implies that customer payment information has not been affected, since neither it was stored on their systems nor processed by them. So if you're a Yodel customer, you might want to check in. I don't know when your packages are going to be there. They're not saying just yet. Heads up, I'll give you information as I get it. Moving on, let's talk about automotive hose maker, pretty important part in a car. Nichiren Flex USA. This is a division of the Japanese hose maker Nichiren. They basically got hit with a ransomware attack, causing them to go offline. This occurred on June 14th of this year, and they are basically saying that customers should expect delays in getting their orders, since the cyber attack also affected the product distribution and orders are being fulfilled manually by their staff right now. Additionally, the firm's website had to be taken down temporarily until their experts were able to determine the extent of the ransomware attack, but it is now back online. And so for now, the US system basically remains isolated from the rest of Nichiren's infrastructure, and there are no signs that the ransomware actors were able to pivot outside of it and hit, let's say the parent company in Japan or other subsidiaries. So hopefully it's an isolated incident. Now, in a separate notice, Nichiren is also warning clients and employees of the possibility of receiving emails that impersonate the firm, suggesting that the ransomware attack was basically possibly had through phishing. So heads up to you, if you're a customer of Nichiren or Nichiren Flex USA, you may be targeted for phishing emails because you're using them as a supplier. Heads up to you, never a fun thing. Moving on. Let's talk about crypto firm Harmony. Recently, a crypto hackers group, I should say, who possibly maintain their operations in the United States, interestingly enough, attacked Harmony, the crypto firm. The blockchain company reportedly lost around $100 million after this massive hack, basically this past week. However, and this is interesting, blockchain network analytics provider Elliptic suggests the crypto losses exceed $1 billion. So we're going to see where this shakes out, but if you use Harmony for all your cryptocurrency needs, you might have been ripped off. Best of luck to you. Here we are. Moving on, let's talk about Fast Shop in Brazil. This is a major retailer in Brazil. They suffered what they're calling a quote-unquote extortion cyber attack, so ransomware, that led to network disruption and the temporary closure of its online stores. The cyber attack occurred this past Wednesday, impacting the Fast Shop main website, mobile apps, and ordering system online, as the retailer took the systems offline as part of its incident response protocol. The attack did not impact its physical shops, of which they have 86 throughout Brazil. The threat actors claimed that over the past 72 hours, since the start of the attack, they were actively extorting Fast Shop after accessing the firm's databases on AWS, Azure, GitLab, and IBM Cloud, stealing website and app source code and valuable user and corporate data. Threat actors allegedly used the stolen information to blackmail Fast Shop into paying a ransom, otherwise they'd leak it to the data. So there you go. It's got to be ransomware, and there it is. Moving on. Let's give you guys a quick update, because Cafe Press was just fined $500,000 for basically a breach affecting 23 million users. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, basically has ordered Residual Pumpkin Entity, the former owner of Cafe Press's t-shirt and merchandise site, to pay the fine for covering up a data breach impacting more than 23 million customers and failing to protect their data. So if you are one of the 23 million customers that are caught up in the Cafe Press data breach, you're probably entitled to $2, something like that. Who knows? We'll see. Moving on, let's talk about Amagasaki. This is basically in the Hyogo prefecture in Japan. An employee who works for the Amagasaki City subcontractor lost a USB storage device containing residents' personal information after drinking at a restaurant, and this is according to the government on June 23rd. Basically, he got drunk, left the flash drive. I'm just assuming it's a he. The employee works for a company that was subcontracted by the Kansai regional branch of Baipraji Inc. in Osaka to pay pandemic relief subsidies to households exempt from the residence tax on behalf of the city government. The city government commissioned the Kansai regional branch of Baipraji to do this work. The USB storage device contained personal information for all 460,000 Amagasaki residents. So if you're a resident of Amagasaki, you may be entitled to even more compensation by virtue of one of their employees getting drunk and losing your information on a flash drive. Interestingly enough, what I know about Chinese culture, though, is that they may actually get that flash drive back unmolested, and we're hoping that that happens. Moving on, let's talk about Flagstar Bank coming out of Michigan. They're notifying 1.5 million customers of a data breach where attackers access the personal data during a September cyber attack. This is coming from Bleeping Computer. Now, according to data breach notifications sent to exposed customers, Flagstar experienced a security incident in December of last year when intruders breached the bank's corporate network. After an investigation, the bank discovered on June 2nd of this year that the threat actors accessed sensitive customer details, including full names and social security numbers. And to quote their breach notification, "We have no evidence that any of the information has been misused. Nevertheless, out of abundance of caution, we want to make you aware of that incident." That is a very standard line I see in multiple breach notifications, as I do this pretty much every week. Now, based on the information submitted to the Office of the Maine Attorney General, the data breach affected 1,547,169 people in the United States. So if you bank with Flagstar Bank, you definitely want to check in. Obviously, it's never fun when banks are hit. They're usually drinking the security Kool-Aid better than most verticals out there. And finally, as I mentioned at the very start, we need to discuss technology, cybersecurity, and privacy issues stemming from Roe versus Wade as it relates to data breaches. Now, this is going to be a two-pronged discussion. First, we're going to discuss femtech apps, and then we're going to discuss social media. Now, I think it's important to note that this is going to focus only on the data privacy and how your information may be used against you depending on what state you may live in. I am not, and I repeat, not straying into politics here. There are heated opinions on both sides of obviously this very controversial Supreme Court decision, and it is objectively controversial. So if you love or hate this ruling, that's really up to you. I always like to say that cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, even though we're not immune from it, and this is one of those things. My only goal here is to help inform everybody about the privacy concerns of their information being breached or sold without their knowledge, which I also consider a data breach. So even outside of femtech and all of that, everybody I think should take notice of these. So if you want to engage me in the comments of this video or podcast, feel free, but I am not discussing the pros and cons of the ruling. I'm not getting into politics. Again, if you're pro-life or pro-choice or whatever you want to call yourself, that is your business. I am a nerd for cybersecurity and privacy, and here we are. Now, in terms of femtech apps, I actually wrote an article back in May about the then upcoming Roe v. Wade decision, which we all know how that went, about femtech apps and basically how they had a serious privacy issue as women were inputting very sensitive information on these platforms. And to quote my own article directly, which you can read to see where I'm getting these facts from, I very heavily research and link everything. So as I'm stating these things, you can go and actually read my sources on this. But to quote me from my article back from May 22nd from smirconish.com, and I quote, "Outside of the Roe v. Wade issue, these apps already present a multifaceted problem for their female users. To begin, these apps have not historically fallen under the umbrella of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, commonly known as HIPAA. HIPAA is a U.S. law that ensures your personal health data cannot be used or given to third parties without your expressed consent. For example, if a woman is pregnant, her doctor cannot pass this information along to a marketing firm specializing in advertising pregnancy items." That is the first prong of this, and I think that is a really important thing to note, that if you're punching in all of this sensitive information, it's not really falling under HIPAA, and historically hasn't as you've been using it. Now, I quote myself again from this article, and I will get off the quotes, but I think this is relevant to what I'm talking about here. And to quote again, fertility and women's health apps do not fall under HIPAA compliance and have been known to data mine their users, typically without their knowledge, as studies show that virtually no one reads the end user license agreements that are oftentimes convoluted and vague. I did a video on that. Something like less than 3% of all people read it, and like 98% of them are the lawyers that write those things probably. So there you go. To continue, and my last quote on myself, quote, further complicating the situation is that one of the largest femtech apps, Flow, that's FLO, misled its users about their data mining policies and took, subquote, no action to limit what these companies could do with this user's information, end subquote. That quote comes from a 2021 Federal Trade Commission complaint filed against Flow. Flow may be one of the most egregious data miners when it comes to this specific type of app, but there is little doubt that they are not alone in these types of practices. And I think that is a very important thing. They're not falling under HIPAA. They've been basically hammered by the FTC on this. And so if you're using these to track things like ovulation cycles, etc., this is a huge problem. Now, this is essentially the backdrop that women face in states where legislatures are set to or planning on basically having total or near total abortion bans or severely limiting the practice of abortions. Now, consider the case of abortion under Texas law. Now that Roe v. Wade is overturned, a 2021 trigger law will be revived that basically states that both the woman having the abortion as well as their doctor performing the procedure could face criminal convictions and prison sentences. Outside of Texas, multiple states also have trigger laws that would ban or severely restrict abortion statewide. We're talking Arkansas, Idaho, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming will all enforce their trigger laws, which would be tantamount to basically a slew of legal challenges all over the country. So think about it this way. Imagine if a woman in Texas is using an app like Flow to track, obviously, the intimate details of things like her ovulation cycle, all of those kinds of things, and then she gets pregnant. She makes the decision to terminate, the pregnancy, understanding the legal repercussions of her state. And for the record, and I'm not giving legal advice to anybody here. For the record, I am not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one. Do what you want, but understand that we are about to have a changing legal landscape, and the local laws by you may be different than the local laws by me. You've got to understand your rights or not rights or whatever they are in your state. So, for example, our fictitious woman here stops using Flow and then travels to a state where the procedure is legal and indeed terminates her pregnancy. Now, upon her return, in this case to Texas, under the Texas law, let's say there's a suspicion that she left the state for an abortion and the authorities are notified. Now, interestingly enough, one of the things that the 2021 trigger law in Texas did was essentially deputize every citizen of Texas to basically turn in women who have had an abortion or basically whistleblow on them, and they could potentially receive $10,000 if that is indeed the case. So that thinking isn't necessarily far-fetched, meaning that, boyfriend that didn't want it terminated or, whatever it is, basically can come to the state and get you in trouble for this. These are things that we need to understand. And that information then can essentially be subpoenaed. Meaning if Flow is giving this information freely to third parties and other places, there's no reason why the state of Texas or local prosecutors couldn't subpoena this information, not just from Flow, but possibly from the third parties they've historically given this to in the past. And that's something that we really need to understand. Now, the second part of this is social media. Many people use Facebook as their personal therapy group, and I am talking about Facebook here because they are obviously the largest platform still on the planet, especially when it comes to this. I have personally seen Facebook friends post medical information on some of the most unfortunate situations that you can think of, on these kinds of things, whether it comes to pregnancies or cancers or other illnesses and all of that. We are essentially using this, not realizing that it's not just us and our friends that can see what we post. It's us, our friends, Mark Zuckerberg, and tens of thousands of his employees, not to mention all the data miners in the world that they just let in through the door. Facebook could be subpoenaed by a state for the information that you put on your Facebook wall, that you send in Messenger, or any other product that Facebook, now known as Meta, owns. Now, on top of this, We also have the issue with Facebook that a recent issue with Facebook that just came to light, and this should be terrifying to everybody. I mean, forget Roe v. Wade for a second. You, me, everybody should be terrified and angered by this one because Facebook, once again, is one of the worst data privacy violators on the planet. And this past week's research shows it. Now, here's what's going on with this, which is why this is terrifying. A tracking tool installed on many hospital websites have been collecting patient-sensitive health information, including details about their medical conditions, their prescriptions, their doctor's appointments, and they've been sending it to Facebook. Really? This is absolutely nuts. Now, here's what's going on. The markup, the platform or the organization, the markup, tested the websites of Newsweek's top 100 hospitals in the United States. On 33 of those hospitals, they found a tracker known as MetaPixel, and that was sending basically Facebook a packet of data whenever a person clicked a button to schedule a doctor's appointment. The data is connected to the IP address, your IP address, and there you go. And that basically creates essentially a receipt for the appointment request for Facebook. So as you're logging into Facebook with your IP address, and then outside of that, you're going to the website to, schedule a doctor's appointment at your local hospital or whatever it is. Now Facebook can match, this IP address, it matches to this user's IP address. Now they know what you're doing, and that's a very easy correlation to do for them on the back end. So as an example, the markup put out a couple of different examples of this. This is absolutely terrifying. And to quote them again, and this is fantastic research by them, by the way, on the website of University Hospitals Cleveland Medical Center, for example, clicking the Schedule Online button on a doctor's page prompted the MetaPixel to send Facebook a text of the button, the doctor's name, and the search term we used to find her, quote unquote, pregnancy termination. There you go. That's what they did, and that's essentially what Facebook got. And so now, if you are that person, bringing it back to Roe, that is looking to terminate their pregnancy in a state that is restrictive of that, now Facebook could be subpoenaed because they have the same information that is supposed to be protected by HIPAA compliance. The hospitals, 33 of them out of the top 100, meaning 33 of the top 100 hospitals in the United States are doing this. That's nuts. Now, to continue, and I'm quoting the markup directly again, clicking the Schedule Online Now button for a doctor on the website for the Froedtert Hospital in Wisconsin prompted the MetaPixel to send Facebook the text of the button, the doctor's name, and the condition we selected from a drop-down menu, which was Alzheimer's. Now, the markup also found the MetaPixel installed inside the password-protected patient portals of 7 health systems. On 5 of those systems' pages, they documented the Pixel sending Facebook data about real patients who volunteered to basically participate in the Pixel Hunt project. That was a collaboration between the markup and Mozilla Rally. Now, the project is crowdsourced, basically is a crowdsourced undertaking. This is from the markup, in which anyone can install Mozilla's Rally browser add-on in order to send the markup data on the MetaPixel as it appears on sites that they visit. The data sent to the hospitals includes the names of patients, medications, prescriptions of their allergic reactions, and the details about their upcoming doctor's appointment. This is all going, for the record, to Facebook. This is all, and listen to this, and this is the kicker of it too, and I'll quote them directly again. The hospitals in question may have violated the Federal Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. You think? The law prohibits covered entities like hospitals from sharing personally identifiable health information with third parties like Facebook, except when an individual has expressly consented in advance or under certain contracts. Meaning, let's say you have an outsourced medical biller, they will fall under the umbrella of HIPAA because they're sending you the bill for your medical work. That is something that you are signing when you are signing the HIPAA consent forms when you walk into a hospital. To quote the markup directly, neither the hospitals nor Meta said they had such contracts in place, and the markup found no evidence that the hospitals or Meta were otherwise obtaining patients' expressed consent, meaning they were doing this without your consent. Facebook was collecting your protected health information from multiple hospitals, and again, they tested the top 100, 33 of the top 100, so that means there are probably thousands of hospitals, not in the top 100, that are doing this here in the United States as well. This is utterly outrageous. That should piss off absolutely everybody that uses any kind of medical system to know that Facebook is now linking this to you as you are going to their websites to schedule what is supposed to be a private and confidential patient consultation, whatever reason you are going to see a medical professional for. This is insane. This is also why I think Facebook needs to basically go under. I've said that multiple times. You're looking at or listening to the guy that literally put out a video, and I'm working on 2.0 now, and this is just beyond outrageous. Basically, with a video entitled, "It's Time to Put Mark Zuckerberg in Jail," and this is exactly why. So, in that vein, here's how we maintain better privacy, especially, and heads up, if you're a woman living in a state that, may not be too friendly to your abortion needs, if you will. Again, I am not getting political here. I don't care if you love or hate this. Everybody needs good privacy. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you advice on breaking the law in your state. I would never do that, for the record. This is a huge, huge thing, but this is how I would maintain privacy if I were a woman, and this is what we do. Now, first things first, do not use apps that track anything reproductive related. Obviously, they can be data mined. Obviously, Flo got in trouble for that. They can be subpoenaed in court. It's best simply not to use these apps. I would just stop using them altogether. Also, if you have been using an app, then you can request removal of your data from the platform. The USA is lagging behind in data privacy laws, and while I don't recommend it, a lot of people, what they will do is lie and claim to be either a citizen of the European Union living in the United States or basically a citizen of the state of California. The European Union has a GDPR, California has a CCPA. Well, again, it's not ethical. It is not ethical, basically, to lie about citizenship or where you live. Those two entities have laws that require those platforms to delete your information and essentially, upon request, send you a verification that they've done that in a timely manner, meaning you're scrubbing your data off of those platforms, so there you go. Your data is gone from those platforms. The third thing here that I've got is you can use a personal VPN or virtual private network. Basically, this is an app that can go on your mobile phone or your computer. This will allow you to route your internet connection through another state or a foreign country or anywhere else. In this manner, your internet service provider will only be able to see the VPN traffic and not where you're going on the internet, and thus, basically, they're not going to have any evidence or understanding that you're going to one place or the other, because the only internet traffic, anytime you pull up a website or open up an app, the only thing they're going to see essentially is the traffic going through that encrypted VPN tunnel. Also, and this is my point number 4, you can start using privacy-focused search engines like Startpage. Startpage will actually return Google results, but they're totally stripped of tracking. So combining this with a more privacy-centric web browser like Brave, for example, will actually help to ensure anonymity so that the Googles of the world that are data mining the bejesus out of you can't be subpoenaed as well. Meaning, you start Googling, let's say, clinics in other states, Google's going to have a record of that. But if you're using Startpage, you're now routing through a company that's based out of Europe, giving you anonymous and randomized search results, ideally getting you out of that search bubble, that filter bubble, and here we are. Also, and I can't stress this enough, and this is point number 5, do not share personal health details on social media platforms or their messenger services. Again, as I just mentioned, and we just talked about this with Facebook, they are data mined heavily and can be easily subpoenaed in court. That also goes for WhatsApp from Facebook. I've done videos and podcasts on that before to basically show you how essentially insecure WhatsApp is compared to what Facebook actually says it's doing. So there you go. You can go look that one up from a couple of years ago. And finally, when traveling somewhere for sensitive needs, whatever those needs may be, leave your mobile device at home. This is obviously tough. We are addicted to these things. But remember that all mobile phones are essentially a sea of sensors, even if the GPS function is turned off. Simply turning off your mobile phone is no longer considered secure, as they don't fully turn themselves off when they are powered down and they can be tracked. Go look at iPhone. I recently did a video/podcast on this. You cannot physically remove batteries from modern mobile phones anymore. So even when they're powered down, they are still actually pinging cell towers and doing other things as well. Again, I recently did a video on this. Cellular towers always know your location relative to theirs, so tracking can be ubiquitous. And I go on in my article, to talk about other things as well. Like basically because we have GPS, and GPS is always not 100%, when you're getting the location of a cell phone, let's say you're pregnant and visiting a relative that lives a block away from, a clinic or something like that in another state, and then you have a miscarriage, that could be construed as this, and now you've got GPS data that puts you in the vicinity of a clinic. I mean, these are things that we really need to talk about and we really need to discuss. Again, I'm not adjudicating whether you're for this or against this. All I am is a privacy advocate. Everybody requires privacy. I don't care what you believe. Everybody deserves privacy in that way, shape, or form. So there you go. Those are your breaches of the week. Roe v. Wade edition for obvious reasons, because this is obviously going to change drastically the legal landscape. This is opening up a box of questions, that I think we're going to need to be hammered out and answered in the coming months. As again, we are seeing, some rights maintained in some states, some not in others. I mean, like I said, it's a complete mess. So again, I don't care what your politics are. If you start talking about how this is amazing or horrible, or whatever it is, I'm not going to respond to those things. I am a nerd, so I'm talking about cybersecurity, I'm talking about privacy, I'm talking about your privacy, and how you can be data breached personally on very sensitive things. So those were your breaches of the week. This week, I'm just going to say every American was affected, and hopefully nobody else was. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everyone.